Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Speaker. I have a procedural motion. The clerks have advised me that this is the correct time to introduce it. I'd like to move that in accordance with Section 2760 of Chapter 27 Council Procedures, City Council remove item EX 21.17 headed Toronto Hydro's hired consulting firms from the Executive Committee and bring it forward to the City Council for consideration at the January 31st, February 1st, 2017 meeting. Speaker, I'd like to speak to this motion.
Okay, so we have to vote on it first. Oh, you want to speak? Okay, Councillor
My understanding is it's a debatable item.
Perks,
yeah. So, members, just first for some context. As you may remember, last year the Toronto Star reported that two senior members of Mayor Tory's campaign team, Mr. Nick Kuvalis and Mr. Bob Richardson, had been retained as consultants by Toronto Hydro. Out of a concern for the public appearance of this and trying to maintain public confidence in the clarity and transparency of how we retain consultants at our agencies, Councillor Davis and I brought an administrative inquiry to this council in October. In the December meeting of council, Toronto Hydro, through the city manager, provided a response. And as you know, it's our procedure here that when there's a response to an administrative inquiry, we have two options. We can receive the item and decide that we're satisfied and the information is sufficient, or if we have further concerns, we refer the item to the committee. Council took that decision and the item was referred to the Executive Committee. Prior to that Executive Committee meeting, I wrote to the Mayor in his capacity as Chair of Executive Committee and asked that Toronto Hydro staff be present to answer questions. Executive Committee, in its wisdom, did not take that course of action and instead decided to defer consideration of the item indefinitely. The remedy that's available to members of council when a committee has done that and still believe that there needs to be a debate on the item is what I'm doing now, attempting to remove the item from committee so that we can debate it. The reason why I think this is important is we have a lot of debates and arguments here about what's the correct way for the city to be governed and where we should spend our money, but we have some shared and fundamental understandings about how we do that. One of them is to make sure that public money is always spent for public purposes, improving the quality of lives for the citizens we represent. Another of those fundamental pillars is that we are transparent and accountable for how that is done. That members of the public can assure themselves that we are diligent and only consider the public interest when we make decisions. We have rules governing that, and those rules I want to quote from briefly, specifically the Code of Conduct that governs both us and the majority of boards and agencies that we oversee. I want to refer to two items in that. Members of local boards should be committed to performing their functions with integrity and to avoid the improper use of influence of their office and conflicts of interest, both apparent and real. I want to stress that, apparent and real. Further, members of local boards are expected to perform their duties in office and to arrange their private affairs in a manner that promotes public confidence and will bear close public scrutiny. Now, while that applies to the TTC and it applies to the parking authority, we ask it of our BIAs, our arena boards, it doesn't apply to Toronto Hydro. Nevertheless, I think it's incumbent on the leadership of Toronto Hydro, given that they are 100% owned by this government, by the citizens of Toronto, to make sure that they too attempt to adhere to that standard. I want to read to you briefly from some of the response that we got from Toronto Hydro to the inquiry. I want to read two sections. In response to a question, what process was undertaken to recruit these consultants, Toronto Hydro wrote, external professional service providers are selected either through a competitive bidding process or on the basis of their unique specialized expertise. That does not tell us in this council how and why these two consultants were hired. In fact, it's deliberately non-responsive and evasive. Further, in response to our 10th question, did Toronto Hydro consult with members of the Toronto Public Service, etc.? The answer is, as an arm's-length commercial entity, Toronto Hydro is not required to consult with the Toronto Public Service or a member of council prior to retaining external professional service providers. Did they or didn't they? We don't know. The answer is non-responsive. And if you read through the rest of the answers, you'll see they are all non-responsive. Now, I'm asking only that we have an opportunity on this council to debate the item and to ask questions of staff. I don't know what happened. Neither do you, nor does the public. And we have a duty as the representatives of the public in the expense of public money to make sure they do know. So please support this request so that we can get to the bottom of this and clear the air. Thank you.
Okay, so we're voting on the item now, right? Yeah. Okay, recorded vote. Members of council, can you please take your seats? We're in the middle of a vote. Councillors? Okay.
Councillor Davis, please.
Councillor Crisanti, please.
The motion to remove does not carry. The vote is 16 to 27.
Okay, thank